Two massive private security guards gripped Deborah's arms, their fingers digging into her skin as they dragged her across the polished hardwood floor of the main hallway. She wasn't walking. She was being hauled out like trash. Deborah screamed, her heels scraping against the floor, fighting against their hold with every ounce of strength she had left in her 8-month pregnant body. She yelled at them to let her go, shouting that this was her house, but the men didn't even blink. They marched her toward the massive double doors, their faces blank and professional, treating the crying pregnant woman like a hostile intruder. The doors swung open, revealing a wall of rain and the dark, wet pavement of the driveway. With a final synchronized shove, the guards released her. Deborah stumbled forward, her balance thrown off by the weight of her belly. She hit the cold, wet concrete hard, skinning her palms and knees. The shock of the cold rain was instant, soaking her silk dress in seconds. She gasped, instinctively curling around her stomach to protect the baby, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Before she could push herself up, the click of heels echoed on the entryway tiles. Deborah looked up through the rain-streaked hair plastered to her face. Oliver Harrington stood under the shelter of the grand portico, dry and immaculate in a tuxedo. Beside him, Lillian Hayes leaned against the doorframe, wrapped in a white fur stole that looked like fresh snow. She wasn't holding a drink. She was holding Deborah's jewelry box. Oliver adjusted his cufflinks, looking down at his wife in the mud with an expression of mild annoyance, as if she were a stain on his driveway that needed power washing. He told the guards to stand down but to keep the perimeter secure. He stepped forward, staying just out of the rain's reach. He told Deborah that he had warned her. He said he told her explicitly that the locks were changed at noon and that her access codes were revoked. He asked why she had to make this so difficult and force him to hire contractors to remove her. Deborah choked back a sob, wiping mud from her cheek. She shouted that she had been to the doctor. She told him the baby's heart rate was irregular. She asked how he could do this today of all days. She tried to stand, her legs shaking violently, but slipped back down onto the wet asphalt. Lillian stepped forward then, a cruel smile playing on her lips. She opened the jewelry box, picking out a diamond necklace, an heirloom from Deborah's grandmother that Deborah had foolishly trusted Oliver to keep in the safe. Lillian draped it around her own neck, admiring the sparkle even in the dim porch light. She told Deborah that stress was bad for the baby, so really Deborah was the one being irresponsible by coming back here where she clearly wasn't wanted. Lillian said the house had a new energy now, a winning energy, and Deborah's desperate vibe was ruining the feng shui. If you're already furious watching this, hit that like button. We need to expose guys like Oliver. And make sure you subscribe, because you do not want to miss the moment this arrogance gets crushed. Deborah saw the necklace and felt a surge of adrenaline cut through the shock. She screamed at Lillian to take it off. She yelled that it belonged to her grandmother. She tried to lunge forward, but the security guard stepped in, blocking her path like a wall of muscle. Oliver sighed, checking his phone. He told Deborah that legally, everything in the safe was considered marital assets, and since he had paid the insurance premiums, he decided who wore them. He told her the lawyers would be in touch regarding a settlement, but he advised her not to expect much. He mentioned something about a breach of lifestyle clause in the prenup she had signed without reading thoroughly 6 years ago. He said her behavior tonight, the screaming, the trespassing, was exactly the kind of instability that would grant him full custody once the child was born. That threat froze Deborah's blood. Custody. He was going to take the baby. Not because he wanted a child. He had never wanted to change a diaper in his life, but to hurt her. To control her. Deborah looked him in the eye, the rain dripping off her nose. She asked him if he remembered who she was. She asked him if he remembered that her brothers were the ones who taught him how to shoot, how to stand up for himself when he was a nobody. She told him that Malik, Miles, and Mason would burn this entire estate to the ground if they saw her like this. Oliver laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. He exchanged a look with Lillian, who rolled her eyes. He told Deborah to stop living in the past. He said her brothers were ghosts. He reminded her that they had been deployed on a deep cover assignment for 9 months with zero contact. He said for all anyone knew, they were never coming back. He told her she was unprotected. He said she was alone. Lillian chimed in, leaning her head on Oliver's shoulder. She said that even if the toy soldiers did come back, Oliver was a billionaire now. She said he owns the police chief, the mayor, and the best lawyers in the state. She asked Deborah what 3 grunts in camouflage could possibly do against a man who could buy their entire regiment. Oliver signaled to the guards. He told them to toss her bag out. One of the guards threw a duffel bag onto the driveway. It landed in a puddle with a splash. It wasn't her clothes. It was trash bags filled with her old things. Oliver looked at Deborah one last time. He told her to get off his property before he called the police for trespassing. He said she had 5 minutes. Then he turned his back. Lillian blew a mocking kiss, wiggling her fingers, and the heavy doors slammed shut with a finality that shook the ground. The sound of the deadbolt sliding into place echoed like a gunshot. Deborah was left in the dark, the rain intensifying into a thunderstorm. She crawled toward the duffel bag, dragging it to the shelter of a large oak tree near the gate. She was shivering uncontrollably. She reached for her pocket to find her phone, praying it hadn't been crushed in the fall. It was cracked, but it lit up. 10% battery. No service. She let out a guttural scream of frustration, throwing her head back against the bark of the tree. She was 5 miles from town. She had no car. Oliver had reported it stolen the moment the divorce papers were filed. She began to walk. 3 weeks later. The contrast between Deborah's life and Oliver's couldn't be sharper. While Oliver was photographed on yachts in the Mediterranean with Lillian, Deborah was sleeping on a cot in the back room of a 24-hour laundromat. The owner, an old woman named Mrs. Higgins, had taken pity on her, letting her stay in exchange for cleaning the machines at night. Deborah was heavily pregnant now, days away from her due date. Her ankles were swollen to twice their size. Her hands were raw from scrubbing detergent trays. She looked nothing like the vibrant woman who had run a charity foundation just a month ago. She looked exhausted, broken, and terrified. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. The laundromat was empty except for the hum of the dryers. Deborah was wiping down the glass of the front door when a black SUV pulled up to the curb. It wasn't a military vehicle. It was a luxury car. The window rolled down. It was Lillian. Deborah froze. She hadn't seen Lillian since the night at the mansion. Lillian wasn't alone. She was with 2 of her friends, women who looked just as expensive and cruel as she did. They were coming from a club, laughing and drunk. Lillian spotted Deborah through the glass. Her eyes widened, and then a wicked grin spread across her face. She stepped out of the car, wobbling slightly in her heels. She motioned for her friends to follow. They walked into the laundromat, the bell above the door jingling cheerfully, a stark contrast to the tension that sucked the air out of the room. Lillian covered her nose, pretending to gag. She loudly announced that it smelled like poverty and desperation there. Deborah gripped her spray bottle, her knuckles white. She told Lillian to leave. She said they were closed. Lillian ignored her. She walked up to Deborah, stepping onto the freshly mopped floor with muddy shoes. She looked at Deborah's stained apron. She asked if this was the empire Deborah had built. She laughed, turning to her friends, telling them that this is what happens when you don't know your place. One of the friends noticed Deborah's belly. She made a comment about how sad it was that the baby would grow up folding other people's underwear. Lillian laughed harder. She reached out and knocked the spray bottle from Deborah's hand. It clattered loudly across the floor. Lillian stepped closer, invading Deborah's personal space. She whispered that Oliver didn't even mention Deborah's name anymore. She said he had already turned the nursery into a walk-in closet for her shoe collection. She said Deborah was erased. Forgotten. A bad memory. Deborah felt a sharp, tearing pain in her abdomen. It was sudden and blinding. She gasped, grabbing the counter for support. Water gushed down her legs, pooling on the floor. Her water had broken. Lillian stared at the puddle. She didn't call for help. She didn't offer a hand. She recoiled in disgust. She yelled at Deborah, asking if she seriously just made a mess on the floor. She told her friends to let go before they caught something. They turned to leave, giggling, leaving a woman in active labor alone on the floor of a laundromat in the middle of the night. Deborah collapsed, screaming for Mrs. Higgins. But the old woman was deaf in one ear and asleep in the back. The contractions were hitting her back-to-back, violent and fast. She fumbled for her phone. It was dead. She was going to have this baby right here on the cold tile alone. But as Deborah's vision blurred with pain, the front door of the laundromat didn't close. It was held open by a large booted foot. The giggling of Lillian and her friends stopped abruptly outside. It was replaced by a gasp of pure terror. Deborah looked up through the haze of agony. A shadow fell over her. A large, imposing shadow. Then another. Then a third. The air in the laundromat changed. It became charged with a static electricity that only exists when dangerous men enter a room. A deep voice, rough like gravel but shaking with suppressed emotion, cut through the silence. "Debbie!" Deborah tried to focus her eyes. Standing in the doorway, blocking out the streetlights, were three men. They were wearing desert camouflage, dust still on their boots, their faces gaunt from months of combat, but their eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. Malik, Miles, Mason. They weren't ghosts. They were home. Malik stepped into the light. He saw his sister on the floor. He saw the puddle. He saw the agony on her face. And then he looked out the window at Lillian, who was frozen by her SUV, staring at the three men who had just materialized like avenging angels. Malik didn't rush to Deborah first. He looked at Miles. He pointed a finger at Deborah to indicate save her. Then he pointed a finger at Lillian outside to indicate stop her. Miles, get the medic kit. Mason, don't let that car leave. Mason, the youngest and most reckless of the three, cracked his neck. He stepped back out onto the sidewalk, moving toward Lillian's luxury SUV with the stride of a predator who had finally found his prey. Malik dropped to his knees beside Deborah, sliding his tactical vest off to place under her head. He took her hand, his thumb brushing away her tears. "We're here, baby girl," Malik whispered, his voice trembling. "We're here. And we aren't going anywhere." Lillian thinks she can just drive away. Oliver thinks his money protects him. They are wrong. The Vance brothers have returned, and they didn't come back to talk. They came back for war. You do not want to miss the next video. We are going to see exactly what Mason does to that car. And we are going to see the moment these three brothers walk into Oliver's gala and shut it down. Subscribe and turn on notifications right now. Part 2 is coming, and the revenge is going to be legendary. Hit that like button and comment if you are ready to see Oliver lose everything. See you in the next video.